Right, so in today's tutorial, we'll be going through the first application of compression. If you haven't seen my previous tutorials, I highly recommend you see them. Just because we go through dynamic processes as a whole, not just compression, and then I go down into the parameters a bit more of compression and just give you a quick introduction to compression before jumping down into the applications. Just because I thought I'd talk about compression as a whole and some applications and why you want to do some things over other things, and the fact that there's more than just one application to compression. Right, so let's jump in the tutorial. So specifically for this tutorial, we're talking about this sound here. So I'll be showing compression examples in context. So we're going to talk about how I made this sound bigger, because it's very like kind of choppy. So there's a lot of audio happening very quickly that we uh, don't necessarily hear. So let's just dive down into that a bit more. So let's play just the whole section, and then I'll mute this or just solo this section here. Right, so I'll be playing that with the other sounds later. So let's just focus on this sound. And I want you to focus on this compressor here. So why have I compressed it? Well, it's to make it bigger in the mix, because it's very choppy, and those quick transient sounds, we don't really hear a lot of that. So this brings me on to talking about peak and RMS. So here you can see the dark green is the peak, and then the light green is the RMS, and the RMS is what we're actually hearing, because the peak happens so quickly that we don't really hear it. Like, so what I did with this compressor is just cut those sounds out, so we've got room to turn it up. Because if I turn it up, it'll clip, and you'll see here that it clips here. And I've actually had to turn it down even more before hitting the compressor. So here you can see it clips a bit. It just clips. So I have to turn it down, and then it just hits 0 dB. And then that's when I start compressing it. 0 dB is my starting compressing point, just because it was clipping. And you can see that I've compressed it so much that I've actually limited it, and the tack is the lowest it can be, so it compresses straight away, and the release is so low that when it goes below the threshold, it goes back to its original level. So the gain reduction goes to 0 very quickly. So you can see how choppy the gain reduction meter is, like bouncing up and down because of the attack and release being so low. And that's what I wanted, because I wanted to get rid of those choppy sounds, so I could turn it up, because it was quite far back in the mix. So let's just mute these just so you can hear this compressor on its own. Off. So you really hear those transients hitting. And they're just annoying, so let's just turn this up even more. Just for demonstration, I'll turn it up and show you again. So it hasn't really changed much of the sound at all. That's quite the difficult part about compression, that you don't really hear it. You're just able to do more with it, more with the sound after compressing it. It's like, compare the input and the output. Look at that headroom we have. And then I've got that headroom to add even more effects. So here I'm just controlling the sound even more with this compressor. So I didn't want to have too much on this compressor, because if you can not overload, but if one compressor's doing too much, it can affect the sound like more than just the dynamic range. It can also add harmonics that I don't want, so I just break it down into 2 compressors, and I thought I'd use this mastering compressor, which is free, by the way. This will be in the description. Because mastering compressors are very clean. So here it goes to 4 dB gain reduction, and then I make up for some of that gain reduction here, and then I EQ it afterwards to kind of add that extra dB. So it's quite light compression. The threshold is quite low. Again, the attack and the release is very quick. So the reason why the release is quite long here is just so it doesn't sound a bit too choppy. So you're not really hearing the effects of compression. It's just smoothing it out. And so yeah, I do go through attack, release, and the parameters in the previous tutorial. So I highly recommend you do that. You watch them. And because I've got all that room, all that headroom now, I can boost the parts of the sound I want to hear. So here I have, it's this way around. Yep. So 2 dB boost at 8K. Remember, these are quite wide bands, since there's only 4. So I do very subtle boosts, and then 4 dB boost at 12.5K. And then do a 2 dB boost at 20K. So like I said, these are very wide bands. So I'm not just boosting 20K, I'm boosting a bit below and a bit above 20K. So let's just A/B here. So I just want to show that you can do, once you've got that space that compression gives, you're able to do more with it. So this is before. This is after. See, it's not that louder, but we hear a lot more of that, a lot more of the character of the sound, because we're able to boost that character of the sound because of the headroom. And then I'm a bit more precise here. So I don't really feel like I need to A/B this. Because this is EQ. I'll be going through EQ and analog EQs in a future tutorial. So yeah, that's the processing, that's the compression on this sound. So let's just listen to the whole thing. Let's leave this here. You see, look at the metering. So like here, I'll just play it here. It's around 0 dB. So with compression, I've got that headroom. So I'm able to turn it up after cutting that peak level out. So yeah, that's the tutorial. Pretty simple. Once you start getting in the habit into knowing what needs compressing after listening to it, then it would just be second nature to you, like compression. And so remember, the most important part about compression, I've said this in the last 2 tutorials, the most important part about compression or any dynamic process is knowing why you're putting it on there. You need to have an intention beforehand. Don't just put it on for the sake of it or see what will happen. You need to know what you're doing beforehand, because it's more of a mixing tool than a sound design tool. So yeah, that's the tutorial. So I'll see you in the next one where I talk about the next application. All right, see you.